Hello, Bookworms. Tibber is dead. My name is Whitney, and we are doing another Throwback Thursday. This week, we are going to be talking about Color Me Dark. This one is another one in the Dear America series. I covered a different book last week, last Thursday, and this one is by Patricia McKissack, I want to say is how you pronounce her name, and really enjoyed this one. Last week, we had read My Heart is on the Ground, which is authored by Anne Rinaldi, and there's just a lot of issues with this book, and it's quite controversial. I did leave links in last Thursday's video, so if you want to know more about this, go to the description and check out the links. I'm not very articulate in the best of times, and there was a couple articles that explained just how problematic this book is. And yeah, I completely agree with the links that I left down below with the people who wrote those articles in that paper, because this one was not very well done at all, but this one I really felt it was. And I think one of the reasons it was is the author actually mentions, in her little portion of the book where she talks about that she had family that lived through the 1919 Chicago riots. And so she, is part of her actual family history, which I think helped a lot. Excuse the cat, she wants in, and I actually have the door closed today. So I think that really helped a lot. And what I liked about this book too is it really captured the tragedy of everything, but there was still that underlying um, vein of hope, I guess. And so I think, that's what the author of My Heart is on the Ground, I think she was kind of trying to have that hopefulness. Obviously, this is aimed for young girls. And I like that, they're bringing history to, kids, specifically young girls. But at the same time, I think this kind of just was disrespectful to the culture and the heritage. And so, it's fine to have that underlying vein of hope, but you still need to capture, the problems and the tragedy of everything. And I thought this one did it very well with the lynchings and the riots and everything like that. But there was still that hope there as well. So you can see I actually recently got tabs. I've never used tabs before, but I got some tabs thinking, I'll kind of use these to mark important spots because I don't always mark them. And then even though I might put like a bookmark in that spot, when I go back, I have to like try to find the part that I wanted to mark. So I actually got some tabs for this one. I'm gonna go ahead and go through. So it follows Nellie Lee. They start off in Tennessee, um, kind of in like a poorer town. The blacks are on one side of town and the whites are on the other. There's like a railroad and a road that separate them, and things just kind of get really bad. There are soldiers coming back from the World War I, and as the soldiers come back, they're getting lynched. And they have a family member, her uncle ends up getting lynched and ends up dying. And it just starts getting really out of hand, and they decide to go ahead and move up north to Chicago, which a lot of people are during that time. And not only, colored people, but poor white people are headed that way too. And I like how it highlights that there wasn't just racial issues at the time, but like in Chicago, there was also class bias as well. So like wealthy people of color would, kind of discriminate against the poorer black folk that were coming up. And so, it captured that as well. And then she talks about it, in the historical aspect, and then her own thoughts and such as well. So I'm just going to kind of go through, but yeah, it follows Nellie Lee and then her sister, her mother, and her father. And so the first one that I marked here is Nellie Lee is kind of fairer skinned, and then her sister Irma Jean is really dark skinned. And so that causes some issues. Like Nellie Lee is favored by the outside world because she's a little bit lighter. And so that's kind of where the premise of the book comes from, Color Me Dark, because she's she's proud to be a black woman, and I mean, obviously she's a kid, so she's not a woman at this time, but she's proud to be a young black girl, and so she, you know, kind of uses that phrase "colored me dark" when people, maybe make comments and things like that. Um, she's talking about that Irma Jean's her best friend. The same red blood runs in her veins as, in both their veins. And then, but there's one thing I wish I could do. If I could, I would color myself dark. Then Irma Jean and I would look more like sisters on the outside. And I just like that line because it does show they are sisters, but yet because they're slightly different in appearance, that they get treated different, and people don't treat them as sisters. So I kind of really like that line, and that's why I marked it. And like I said, that kind of shows the title of the book and how it comes into play. And that's not the first time that's the first time it comes into play, but that's not the only time it comes into play. And then they have an uncle who is a little bit slower, and so she talks about he's slow and he's not right in the head. And it says it must be hard not being right in the head, like it's hard sometimes being the darker sister, the mother of three children under three, or the daughter of an undertaker. And I like that line because it captures like they each have their own individual struggles. And the mother of the three children under three is her aunt. She has three boys that are quite rambunctious. So that was on page 17, and I just really, really liked that line because it really does capture, like she still has her struggles, being the daughter of the Undertaker and such, which is different from her sister's struggles because her sister is darker, so she gets treated a little bit differently and such. So it kind of recognizes, even though you have different privileges, you also have different struggles as well. So I really liked that line. Um, and then I go a little ways back. That was on page 17, and now I'm on page 43. Um, and it's talking about they have this little group in their town, Colored Men's Improvement Association. And her aunt Danny was visiting. She lives in New York, and she accused the men of being cowardly because basically there's the National Associate. I can't remember what it stands for, but it's the NAACP, and they put out this newsletter called Crisis, which brings up important topics and such, and it's being banned where they are at, and so they're not allowed to subscribe to it and read it and such, or they run the risk of being targeted. And so Aunt Fanny comes in and she accuses the men of being cowardly, waiving the February issue of the Crisis. She asks them, how can you sit here trembling like rabbits while the Klan lynches people and the government does nothing? You're afraid even to say you are members of the NAACP, hiding behind the Colored Men's Improvement Association. And then it goes on, one of the guys is like, we have families, like, we can't run that risk. And so it's kind of hard. And it kind of made me think back when I was reading The Ring. It's like, what do you do? Like, you want to stand up and, show your support, but at the same time, that makes you a target. So where's that line between, standing up and doing what's right and protecting yourself and your family? So I really like that line, and I appreciated that because it's a struggle to do so. And then I kind of go through a little bit more, and now I jump to page 119, and so they're in Chicago at this point, but they're trying to make themselves, more city. And so she says, call me Nell. Nellie Lee is country sounding. It's hard being called backward and country bumpkins because we talk slower and have double names. And so that's kind of where the class bias comes into play as well. And like I said, it's not, the whites necessarily, it's, the more well off people of color that are already there, kind of discriminating against them because they're country. And then I go just a few more pages, and this one, this was actually an actual historical event that happened. Obviously, she is using, different characters that are fictional and such, but this is a historical event that happened. And so they were at the beach. Obviously, this fictional families at the beach, but this really did happen. and they're segregated. So there have the whites only swimming area and then the blacks only swimming area. And a teenage boy ended up drifting into the whites only area, and he got rocks thrown at him and he ended up drowning, and the police did absolutely nothing. And that's kind of what set off the riots. And so she used these fictional characters, and that's what happens. Um, and Nellie Lee is like, this can't be happening, not in Chicago. This isn't Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, or Tennessee. And it just shows, it doesn't matter where you are, the prejudice and such can happen at anywhere. Um, and then the next one is on page 141. And this is, again, they're trying to kind of become more cityfied and like the more almost white, and it kind of just broke my heart. So their one neighbor downstairs does hair and such, and so she's doing, and it just shows again the treatment of the two sisters. So her name's Miss Hamilton. That's the neighbor that does the hair, and she's talking to Nellie Lee, telling her, "You have good hair. It's long, thick, and straight." And then she turns to Irma and says, "Now, honey, you got some bad hair, but not to worry. I can fix it up so people will think you've got white folks' hair." And that was just really, really heartbreaking to read that, and again see the different treatment for the two sisters, and then the fact that they felt like they had to become more like white folk, and more cityfied, like the people of color that were already in the city, and kind of act more like white folk, I guess. So and then I jump way back to 174. And this one just, I forgot for a moment I was reading a fictional work. And I think this one was done in 2009, I want to say. Let me see if I can. 2000. So this was copyrighted in 2000, but I forgot that I was reading a fictional work. And so Nellie Lee has a thing with numbers, which I absolutely love. And so it's 1919. And so every month there's a 319 month, which I'm kind of obsessed with numbers like that too. And so this is Friday, December 19th, 1919. And she says it's all 319s again. This is the last time this year I will see those numbers in a date. The next time it happens will be January 20th, 2020. So you'll have 320s. And um, she wonders if we'll have a blue moon that year as well, because blue moons are rare. And I really like that, but I forgot for a moment that it was fictional. So I was like, wow, it's 100 years later, like almost, a little over 100 years later, and we're gonna have the three dates again. And then I was like, well, this is fictional. It wasn't even written in 1919, but it just, that's how enjoyable this book was. Like, you really felt like it was a real diary. And then this one is the historical account. And so it's kind of taking you through the different things that happened and whatnot. And some of like the real characters like Ida B. Wells, and this one is talking about the difference between the North and the South, and it says there was far less overt racism than in the South, but there was plenty of class bias. And so, like I said, you still see that racism and such, but it's more class bias, and it's the same between you see that class bias even among their own race, and that's kind of sad as well. They really should stick together, but they don't. So yeah, overall, I say this one's definitely one to pick up for just to read yourself. There's a lot of history here that I wasn't familiar with, and I think it's a great one if you do have kids to read with them as well and teach them some more history. So definitely one of the Dear America series I would strongly encourage you to pick up. I'm hoping once I kind of make my way through the rest of my collection, I can maybe go through all the Dear America series. I know I've read some of the other ones, but I can't remember which ones I did read and which ones I didn't. But I think that would be a fun little series to do, is kind of do all of the Dear America. I recently watched How to Train Your Gavin, and he did all the Goosebumps, like the 62 original Goosebumps books, and I would like to do something like that with the Dear America series, you know, kind of read them all back to back and then kind of rate them and such like that. So, really, really did enjoy this one. This is one that you should definitely pick up and read for sure. And like I said, especially if you have children, a good way, you know, to get them more familiar with different history and such. So I'm gonna go ahead and leave you guys here. Happy reading, everyone. Bye.